Today we are going to discuss harmonic progression, how we move from one harmony to another in a logical progression, how our system works in terms of moving from one chord to another and creating a logical path through those sonorities to eliminate a phrase through harmony. Now, there are some rules to how this works, and we need some definitions first. The first definition is what do we mean by harmonic progression? The best way to describe this is the succession of harmonies towards a goal, a specific goal we have in mind. Our goals we might refer to as axis. And if you think of this in terms of axis, we start at a place where we all know. And let's call that axis 1, a place that makes sense to us. And we have to have in a musical journey somewhere to go. We must leave where we start and go somewhere with that material. And we'll refer to this as also a point as an axis, and this will be axis 2, our goal. Now, for a musical journey in the tonal system, to be complete, it must return to its original materials. You must sense a completion and return. A return to our original spot, or axis 1. So any given musical journey is a movement from axis 1, our home base, to axis 2, our sense of we have arrived somewhere else, and then our return to the original place, our axis 1. Harmonically speaking, we refer to this as a journey from our tonic harmony in any given key to our dominant harmony in that same key, and back to our tonic harmony. So we outline our harmonic language by starting someplace where we all agree is our starting point, that is the tonic, going to a place our ears and history have taught us to be our place of remove, which is our dominant, back to our tonic at the end. I start here, I end up here, and I return here. Tonic, tonic, dominant, tonic. Harmonic progression is how I move from here to here with a logical stream of harmonies, triads and seventh chords. How I move from here to here in the logical movement of harmony to harmony, one chord to another. That is the purpose of a musical composition, and the order in which those chords appear, those harmonies appear, is referred to as harmonic progression. So, there are going to be three issues we need to deal with, need to understand in terms of how harmonic progression works. The first is the logic of the rhythm, the logic. The second is the harmonic rhythm. And lastly is the degree of stability. Logic, we refer to that as which harmony succeeds which harmony. Do they make sense? Their order makes sense to the rules that have developed over time. Rhythm. Does the rhythm, the rate of change for each of those harmonies, match the logical harmonies? Do these two match? Does the rhythm match the logic? Lastly, stability. Does the inversion of our harmony, root, first, second inversion, third inversion, fourth, seventh chorus, reflect the arc of the logic as well, the arc of drama moving from axis 1 to axis 2. So those are our three issues. Logic, which harmony succeeds which. Rhythm, does the rate of change make sense to our ears and make sense according to the harmonies we have chosen. And lastly, degree of stability, does the inversion at which we have chosen also reflect on the logic of the examples chosen. Now let's take a simple harmonic progression, and if you're looking at the slides, this would be the one in E flat. We have tonic, tonic, supertonic, leading tone, subdominant, and mediant, triads. Now you can listen to that, you can hear. and indeed all are triads, so they're all very acceptable harmonies to our ears. They're very acceptable sonorities in and of themselves. Triads are all acceptable. Triad, major, minor, and diminished triads are all acceptable to our ears. However, their order is not logical. We do not sense an arc that has moved us from one axis to the other. Instead, they have seemed arbitrary. Their choices are arbitrary. Now listen to this one, which is the second example, which is tonic, supertonic, subdominant, dominant, and tonic. In this case, I think it's pretty clear. The succession of harmonies, the logic of what we have chosen, makes sense to ears. Now, we're going to get more into that later, but that's important to know that there is a logical order that has sense to our ear, that over time has developed a logic that we understand. I'll give you another one. Tonic, moving to tonic, moving to submediate, to moving to then subdominant, and then to leading tone, back to tonic. This also made sense to our ear as the second one did as well. Both of these make sense. Both of those made sense, but they made sense in different ways. So one of the things we realized is that the logic is not fixed in place. There are many alternatives, many different tonal paths. And we're going to learn over time how many tonal paths there really are. Secondly is the logic of the rhythm. Does the harmonic progression make sense to the rhythm? And here we'll take the key of F sharp minor, and we'll move from tonic to our submediate, then to our supertonic half diminished seventh, to our dominant, to our dominant seventh, to our tonic here. Excuse me. Now, those chords in and of themselves made sense. Now, listen to this rhythm we have that I am imposing upon that progression. We can see, although the progression still makes sense, the rhythm did not match it. The rhythm did not work. We held some harmonies too long, and others, like the last one, is in a weak position, and it does not give us a strong emphasis that we've really completed. Now listen to this example where everything is very even. With two beats for every example, we have a logical rhythm for the harmonic progression we have chosen in that case. So we see, indeed, that matching it up gives us a more stronger sense we have moved forward. Here's another one. Now in that case, it was not even. We had a doubling up of halving the values on the last two chords. Well, actually, the second to the last and the first to the last chord. And we had doubling up. This rhythm is not the same as the other, but it also indicates the logic. It fits the logic of the harmonic progression. So we see again, like we had in harmonic progression, there are more than one paths we can choose to take. We have more than one choice of harmonic rhythm to match a specific harmonic progression. But we have certain ones that make sense and certain ones that do not, that are counterintuitive. Lastly, harmonic progression and stability. Which inversion we are going to use? Here I'm going to use progression in F major. We're going to go with tonic, supertonic, subdominant, dominant seventh, and tonic again. Now those were all in root position. Arbitrarily, I'm going to choose to invert some and not to invert others. It sounded right, the progression still sounded right, the rhythm sounded right, but now we have an up and down in terms of our levels of stability. Our root position chords come in the middle, where they should not be, because root position chords are more stable. They should be at the beginning and the end. And our inverted chords come at the beginning and the end, where we want more stability, and with each increasing inversion we have less and less stability. Now, I'm going to choose to have an inversion in the proper order. That is, that my second, third, and fourth harmonies will be inverted, but my first and my last will not. They will be in root position. I think you can all hear there was much more logic in the arc of stability. Through the logic of the phrase, we have a logical progression and a logical rhythm. Now the arc of stability also makes sense because the inverted harmonies are in the middle where we want to be in flow. Here's just another example. Using inversions, they're also in a specific order. In this case, the second and third are inverted. And by doing so, we create an even more logical arc of stability for our level of inverted stability for our logic of our harmonic progression. So those are the biggest issues we're really dealing with in terms of when we're looking at harmonic progression. Now, there are a couple things that we must understand about the idea of the harmonic axis. The dominant is our goal, but we must get there by a means that makes sense. And in our culture, musical culture, we have usually a progression or chord that precedes that dominant that is characteristic, stereotypic harmony that we expect to hear before that. Now this could be one harmony and this could be a succession of harmonies. We refer to this moment of this particular harmony or harmonic progression that leads us to our dominant, that leads us to say we have arrived at our axis as our predominant, or in older texts, dominant preparation. Our dominant preparation or predominant is the harmonic language we see right before the dominant, which tells us we've truly arrived there. The various formulae for this are derived from our half cadence on the dominant. If you remember from our half cadence on the dominant, we have several possibilities. One is the chord that may precede that in a half cadence. In our half cadence may be a tonic, often in first inversion, sometimes in second. It may also be a supertonic, sometimes a supertonic seventh, or it may be a subdominant. These are the typical progressions we see, typical harmonies we see before half cadence. So too, in the case of our axis 2, we tend to see right there as our predominant one of those possibilities. And indeed, we'll add one more to this called the cadential 6/4, which is our tonic and first inversion. In addition to that, any of these formulae may be doubled up. Now you can hear this. I play with it first. That's our tonic. And here would be our first example with the tonic in inversion. That made sense to our ears. Now with our supertonic. Now with our subdominant. All that makes sense. And lastly, with our tonic in second inversion. And we think we can all hear all those made sense. Now, in addition to those one harmonies, any one of these possible cadential formulae can be stacked up. So we could potentially see, for example, our tonic is C again, or that's our tonic again, and we could hear. So you can hear we can stack them up. I could even go back, stack up another. And you can see any of these formulas not only can be expressed by an individual chord, but they can be put in succession as well. Excuse me, try it again. Let me try that again, I just screwed up a bit. And you can hear any succession, and we can even mess around with the order of that. It would have the same effect. So that our dominant, our predominant, what precedes axis 2 can be one chord, which we refer to as predominant, or it can be a chord progression that we refer to as a predominant progression. Either way, it is what we understand is our preparation for the dominant, is what leads us to our dominant. Now, Now that we have this idea, we can start thinking about possible harmonic function. What are the likely movements that we see in harmony? What are the likely movements we see in harmony? And for this, we're going to use three separate ideas. The first is the harmony functional? Meaning, does it outline our axis, or is it linear? Secondly, we're going to think about it in terms of the type of chord, what family it belongs to. Chord family. If you write it that way, it's a better way to put it. Which family does the chord belong to? Lastly, we're going to look at root movement. Root movement. How the root moves will tell us, will be the logic we understand. Now the first is functional harmonies. Some harmonies tell us we're at important points. Others tell us that we are in between them. Strong functional harmonies appear on our downbeats. They appear on strong beats, and they appear at cadence points. These are the ones that hold us together. And going back to discussion about a palette we should have in mind, we should remember that our strong functional harmonies, the ones that have harmonic function that is outlining our axis, would be our tonic, our supertonic, sometimes the seventh, our subdominant, and lastly our dominant seventh. These are the harmonies we can consider to be functional, or if they appear in strong beats. If we're looking at a strong beat, or if we're outlining our axis, we're going to see that at those points. Other harmonies, and sometimes these also, are going to appear in between to give a line a sense of triadic support. It's not going to be a case that every harmony is vitally important to harmonic function. Some are going to fill in the gaps, as it were. Think of it as the architecture of a building. The functional harmonies are the pillars of the building, and the linear harmonies fill in the space in between. They're the struts across the building, the structure to hold the walls up. But they're not holding the building up. The functional ones are. And so we can think of that way. And important to understand that functional and linear harmonies, we must think about the chord families. Specifically, we must think about a parent and child relationship to harmonies. Harmonic chords then are related by families. Our families are really, we have three. Family one is our tonic family. Family two is our dominant family. And then in the middle is our transitional family. Parent, meaning the chord that really defines this, is indeed our tonic and our dominant. And our dominant. Those are our parent chord. Parent chords. Now, in addition to that, though, we can have chords that express essentially that family, that axis, but are not the same chord. In that sense, when we have a member of the family there, we remain at this axis, and when we have it at this family, we remain at this axis. A parent-child chord then has potential child chords, chords that are with the family at that axis. They do not say we're moving to another axis, but instead prolong our sense of being at the axis. And the simple way to remember this, very simple, is that a parent and child usually share two pitches. A parent and child chord share two pitches. So we have, for example, we'll pick a key of A major. We have our tonic. Now, in addition to our tonic that expresses axis 1, we can have a submediant. See, a mediant has two pitches which are held in common. I think your ears can hear, we have not moved very far. In that sense, the child chord, that is the submediant, has emphasized we're still at the axis without staying still. Now, we may use it also, in this case, to make sense of staying still. We may use an inversion and then move to child chord. But we have this relationship between the parent chord and the child chord. So our parent chord for axis 1 would be our tonic, and a child chord would be submediant because it shares the root and third of the tonic, and the other direction, less common but still very possible, would be our mediant chord. Our mediant chord, and in this case you can see once again it shares two pitches with the parent chord. So it's a slightly to a lesser extent, but also the mediant as well. So if I wanted to play any harmonic progression, any harmonization, I want to dwell on one act on my tonic axis. We really didn't go anywhere. I went down to the submediant, I went back to the tonic, and then I went up to the mediant and back down. We really haven't traveled very far. Again, travel in a different way, added some inversions, and that parent and family chord hasn't moved very far. We have not traveled very far. Similarly, at the dominant, we can extend our dominant with the half diminished. And here we'll choose the key of, let's go over this side, we choose the key of B flat. Our dominant is an F chord, the key of B flat, and we could indeed have instead of that an A diminished triad, and that would extend our sense of the dominant. Here we are in B flat. And you can hear, because of course, not only is it parent-child, but it's stacked up together, they give us our dominant seventh, that the leading tone chord is a child chord of our dominant. So we have two families that we know very well, our parent and our child family. What's left is our tonic, mediant, dominant, submediant, and leading tone is the two members that are in between. We refer to these as our transitional family, and that's our supertonic and subdominant. And once again, we can see that, and I will choose here the key of E flat major, that our supertonic would be an F minor chord, and our subdominant would be an A flat major chord, sharing two pitches. And again, we have the sense of maybe not having traveled very far. Here we have A and E flat. They are related. Parent and child chords, they are very closely related and can be used, if not to substitute for each other, to give a sense of remaining more or less in place. They don't necessarily aren't the same thing, but they are remaining in the same axis point. So now we have our three possibilities. We have, if we wish to stay at axis 1. If we wish to prolong our sense of being at axis 1, we could use the tonic, we could go to the submediant, and we could possibly even go to the mediant, although that is less common. Also here, at axis 2, we have the dominant, and we can go to the leading tone. Now obviously the mediant is possible also because the mediant would share two pitches, but it is a little confusing, and it's traditionally only associated with the tonic. We don't associate the mediant with the dominant, so it has only one child. Lastly, we have our transitional moments, our transitional harmony, which is our supertonic and our subdominant. Both you can consider either parent or child. They're sort of equal. They're kind of living together, as it were, but they are the one that's necessarily more compelling than the other. I think all of us can see also that those transitional chords are predominant chords. They're typical predominant chords. So either one of those is possible. So this tells us then our families. And it tells us that some harmonies are going to be strong harmonies and some are going to be weak harmonies. The last thing that helps us to form a musical phrase will be cadence structure. Cadence structure tells us the order of cadence structure tells us where we are in a composition. If I have a composition of 4 phrases, the cadence strength of the last cadence will always trump everything else. Before that, it should be probably always a less firm cadence. Good example. Half cadence is a weaker cadence than an imperfect authentic cadence. The plagal cadence is about the same strength as an imperfect authentic cadence, leading to a perfect authentic cadence, which is our strong cadence. The succession of the succession of cadences will help organize the harmonic progression. The progression of cadences reflecting the harmonic progression should be ever increasingly strong. Moving forward, each one should be leading to a strong cadence. Now, again, like we had said in terms of our actual harmonic progression, there's no set rule. There's an approximate rule. An approximate rule is about the best we can get. And that is that a leading tone authentic, in imperfect authentic cadence is about the weakest cadence we really have, followed by a deceptive cadence, because a deceptive cadence really demands us to move forward. Then would come a half cadence. And after that, a plagal cadence, or an imperfect authentic cadence with the dominant. I personally think that the plagal cadence is stronger, but that's almost a matter of opinion. And then lastly, we have the leading tone perfect, or leading part perfect authentic cadence, and most strong in our concert would be a perfect authentic cadence. Dominant seventh, tonic in root position. This is an approximate order though, and it should descend then as we go through a composition, through a phrase to make a complete statement. Each cadence should probably successfully move towards the strong cadence. That doesn't mean necessarily there won't be a little moving around, but there should be the order that our strongest cadence comes at the end. So we have the logic, which harmonies follow which, the rhythm matching that logic, the degree of stability based on which inversion we are in, the concern or the issue of whether we are in a functional part of harmony, and that is, are the harmonies functional harmonies, or are they filling in the gaps? Are they linear harmonies? And lastly, the order of cadences, how cadences are structured so that they cascade towards the end, the strongest cadence being at the end. Those are basically our those are our issues when we're referring to how harmonic progression works. From there on, it's a little bit more or less understanding basically how the function moves from one to another. And we used to understand which harmony moves to each other by understanding root movement. Regardless of inversion, our root movement will determine the strength of our cadence. We're going to have three types of root movement, and each is going to indicate something else to our ear. The first is root movement by fifth. By fifth. Root movement by fifth is the strongest compelling force forward. It reflects the circle of fifths, and so it tells us we are cascading towards our cadence. And you can hear this. Here I am, now in the key of, well, let me write this out. Here I am in the key of F major, and my goal is F. Here I am, movement by fifth to F. And you can hear that we're being propelled forward. Back that up with another fifth before that, and you can see that the succession of fifths cascades us forward. Back it up even further, and we can see as we are reversing the order of the ascending circle of fifths, we can see how compelling that is by moving forward by fifth. By fifth moves us forward in the music. It propels us forwards in the music rather than backwards. Back it up one more, real quickly here, and we really have the complete circle of fifths at this point. Backwards. And I think all of our ears can hear that that succession of fifths has propelled us towards the end. So root movement by fifth is by far our strongest movement forward. Root movement by third is the opposite. Root movement by third tells us we're more or less staying in the same place. I'll continue in the key of F. And that is moving down by third. And you can see this is going to be a parent and child chord. F major, so it goes tonic to sub E it. And we really haven't moved anywhere. And if I continue that movement down, we eventually start moving it into a series of chords which are parent and child to each other, containing two continuous pitches. And we're gradually moving away, but it's very slow compared to, sorry. That was our circle of fifths, now compared to our moving away by thirds. Takes a long time. It's pretty slow. We're only gradually pulling away. We're remaining more or less at the axis. So moving by third is more or less staying in the same place. Gradually moving away. Lastly, there is movement by second. And there are two uses of movement by second. One is simply ornamentation, returning to our original pitch, our original harmony. I think you can hear that, or even you can hear if we're moving by root, by wave by second, either up or down. It doesn't, since we're not really moving far, instead we're moving right away. It simply becomes an ornamental chord, in that sense, a passing chord, as it were, a neighbor chord, simply filling in the gap between those two harmonies, and we have between these two harmonies, which are identical, we haven't really moved anywhere. So root moved by second has one meaning, that is more or less ornamenting the same one harmony. Secondly, it can be transitional. It can be sending us up into one of the other forms, most likely heading us towards movement by third. It moves as transition. Oh, I should put that the other way so it's clear. Sorry. There we go. And we should see there, we are moving from our tonic to up by second. Now we're in transition to our dominant. Now we're moving by, so we move from moving by second, we transition to moving up by third. So we transition from one form of activity, relatively static, through that movement by second to very much more intensely forward-moving music, forward-moving progression. So we have these three forms, and they combine in various ways to move the phrase forward. Now, if you want your phrase to linger, obviously you're going to stick around quite a while with your moving by third and ornamenting with seconds, and using inversions also to help us hear that we aren't moving very quickly. If you want to move quickly forward, like we're heading to our axis, you're going to be moving more by fifth. If you want to transition out of your axis one, you probably are going to do it through use of a movement by second into this form. If you want to tarry here, you want to stay a while your first axis, or if you're at your second axis, want to tarry there, you'll probably move by third, gradually moving into fifth. So all those are possible, and there are many different possibilities in our culture. For example, here's tonic. Move by third now. By third. Now move by fifth. Now I'm going back. Move by third. Fifth. 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 And so by choosing which of these paths we're using, we give a rhythm, a speed to our harmonic progression. Here's another example. I'm going to move first up by third. Now I'm going to slip down by a fifth. And then I'm going to go by third again. And so we've arrived very weakly at our half cadence. And up by second, moving me down by third. Up by second to my fifth. So transitioning through those various possible movements gives a drama. How I choose it gives a drama to my line, depending on which one I choose. And there are many different paths, and they're always going to be your choice of how you wish to do that. Now, to get all the various paths that are possible and the typical ones that are known, you might want to look at the PowerPoint slides. It's quite in-depth, quite extensive, and you're going to learn these more over time. But our various tonal paths, how we go through moving from one axis to the other, in any given composition is going to be ruled by these three things. Ruled by moving by fifth, moving forward, ruled by third, moving kind of more or less staying in place or remain gradually moving away, and moved by second, either completely staying in place or transitioning into one of these other two forms. So, once again, to review, in harmonic progression, we have a number of issues. The first is the logic, that the harmonies, which harmonies succeed each other in logic, and that is ruled by these rules, as I showed right here. And there's absolutely no one path. You're going to find your own, and each composition is going to demand a different one. Each phrase has its own drama, and so you will choose differently for that. Second is the rhythm. The rhythm of this progression reflects the actual progression in and of itself. This is, again, something we see is different in every particular composition, but there is a logic to it. And lastly, a degree of stability. And for the most part, we're going to see an arc of stability in which our strong points, our root position harmonies are at the beginning and the end, and everything else is less often in root position. Secondly, we're going to be thinking about what types of chords are. Are we thinking of functional chords, those that outline our axis? Or are we thinking of linear chords, those that are filling in the gaps there? Obviously, linear chords are going to include moved by third and moved by second. Functional, probably being more close to using ones that move by fifth. Lastly, we're going to be thinking about the cadence strength, that in the succession of cadences, we are going to be moving probably towards the strongest cadence at the end, and that will be most likely a perfect authentic cadence. All this is reflected then on the choice of harmonies. And each of these harmonies then are either functional, they are structural, that is tonic and dominant from our families, sonic, dominant, or they are linear, they are filling in between. Structural harmonies coming in the strong beats, and at our axis point, the linear harmonies filling in the gap in between. Now, there is no way in one lecture we're going to learn all this. This has to come in much part through experience, from analysis, and from experimentation. I encourage you to look at this PowerPoint for this under a functional harmony or a harmonic progression, and you'll see many, many different paths that can be used. Try them out. Have some fun with it. Find your own.